President Biden is proposing big changes to legal immigration and to asylum law, and World Refugee Day are our topics for today. Hi everyone, I'm immigration attorney Andres Mejer. If you don't know me, I'm an immigration attorney based in New Jersey and an immigrant myself. We help people all across the country and across the world come into the United States legally. Like a lot of you, maybe like some of your friends and family, I had a really hard time dealing with immigration, trying to achieve legal status for me and for my family. We got ripped off by a lawyer that was supposed to help us, but only took our money and wasted our time. And that's what motivated me to become an immigration attorney. I want to avoid people like you to experience all the troubles and suffering that my family and I had. And I want to help you get your legal status with less amount of time and the less stress possible. We have a lot of interesting topics to cover in this video, so let's begin talking about the federal government publishes twice a year what is called a regulatory agenda, which is a preview of all the proposals that are in the pipeline to become federal regulations. At the beginning of June, the Biden administration presented the 2021 Spring Regulatory Agenda, where they described the many ways they intend to move away from the Trump era in everything from legal immigration to asylum on the border. And even though not every proposed rule on this agenda ends up being finalized, this is a clear signal of the priorities and goals this administration has regarding our immigration system. This agenda proposes a set of changes to legal immigration and asylum policies that are worth noticing. First, let's talk about legal immigration. One of the biggest regulations in the works will protect and fortify the DACA initiative by proposing a formal regulation to try and shield this program from legal challenges. This is important because currently the DACA program only exists through a policy memorandum signed by the Secretary of Homeland Security, Jeb Johnson, in 2012. This put DACA in a vulnerable position as the Trump administration repeatedly tried to reverse it. The agenda says the Biden administration intends to publish the DACA regulation for notice and comment in August, giving it a more solid ground to stand on and protection from the future. What does this mean? Remember, DACA is an executive policy that came from a memorandum issued by the president and his staff. When President Obama tried to issue DAPA, it was challenged because it did not follow the notice and comment. And that challenge was successful and stopped the implementation of DAPA. When Trump tried to remove DACA September 2017, he did it through a memorandum, not a notice or comment. And because of that, it was challenged and it was put down. It was challenged multiple times. Had Trump changed DACA with a notice and comment, he likely would have been successful. But because he never did, instead, he just filed appeals after appeals after appeals. Even though the court told him how to change it, he didn't do it. So when Biden coming back and saying, hey, rather than continuing with only a memorandum, we're going to propose regulations for DACA. We're going to listen to those comments, and then we're going to propose a final rule. That means the main argument against current DACA, against DAPA, has been the way it was done, not the ability of the president to actually issue regulations like DACA. It's all been about process. So President Biden is going to fix the process so that it is not subject to argument that the process was not properly done. It doesn't mean they can't say it's not constitutional for other reasons, but this has been the main issue for the past, 9 years? Another major change being proposed in this agenda is to publish a new public charge rule to replace the Trump administration's overturned rule, which imposed a wealth test for new immigrants. Public charge rule is not new. Since the 1882, there's been a requirement that immigrants be able to be self-sufficient. If I'm applying for someone to come into the United States, that individual has, for at least over the past 100 years, had to show, or I had to show, that this individual is not going to get government benefit. Well, the Trump administration tried to do is define what is a public charge and change the rules regarding its implementation. And it made it completely different and much more difficult and much more onerous for everyone. That was overturned by the courts. The Biden administration is going to say, you know what? Trump tried to define what public charge rule is. I'm going to now define it. Now, what does this going to look like? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Besides these changes, there's also a rule that would immediately allow consulates abroad to waive in-person interview requirements for certain visa renewals during the pandemic, and a formal withdrawal of a proposal made by Trump to restrict student visas. Another of the major areas on the agenda involves changes to asylum policy. This administration intends to reshape the asylum process, and for this, it has two major steps to achieve it. First step is to move forward with an interim final rule, which goes into effect immediately, and this will change how asylum seekers who pass a credible fear interview get treated. What this new process would imply is that asylum seekers would be sent to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Asylum Office first. They would only go to immigration court if they were denied asylum by an asylum officer. So, what does this mean? If I'm in the country legally or illegally, I'm going to put it this way, if I'm in the country and I'm not in removal proceedings, if I file for asylum, I go to an asylum officer. If I qualify and the asylum officer grants my asylum, I get refugee status, and a year later, I can apply for my green card. If the asylum officer denies my application, I get put into removal proceedings. If I get caught coming into the border, or if I'm in the United States and get put into removal proceedings, and I file for asylum, I do not see an asylum officer. I go see a judge. I don't get two bites at the apple. This change says all asylum applications will first go to an asylum officer, and only if denied do they go to immigration court. Second step is that the Biden administration will publish a new regulation on asylum law, and what this regulation will do is to expand access to asylum victims of gender-based violence. This regulation, if it gets finalized, would align the United States asylum process more closely with existing international law. A couple of days ago or a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the change in definition to a particular social group. Remember, asylum has three fundamental things you have to prove. One, you're afraid to go back to your country. You're afraid of persecution because bad things happened, or you have a really good reason to believe bad things will happen. Second, you're afraid of whom? Either the government or a group the government can't control. And three, why do you believe the government or this group is going to persecute you? And it has to be for a protected reason. One of the 5 protected reasons, one of them is particular social group. Under Attorney General Jeff Sessions, under the Trump administration, the Department of Justice through the Attorney General tried to restrict who qualifies for a particular social group, meaning who can file for asylum. They tried to eliminate whole groups, people that were victim of domestic violence or gender-based violence, and also gang violence. What the Biden administration did is retract those decisions from the Attorney General, saying, hey, the agency is going to prepare regulations on this. We want the agency to be flexible and have their flexibility. So because of that, they withdrew the decision that Jeff Sessions and the Attorney Generals under the Trump administration did. What does that mean? That means victims of domestic violence and victims of gang violence, once again, can qualify for a particular social group. But that's based on case law, which is what it was before the Trump administration. The Biden administration is saying, hey, we're not going to rely only on case law. We're going to create rules and regulations that make it clear who is and is not a particular social group based on regulation. So that's going to bring, hopefully, clarity and consistency, and will make it harder in the future for an administration to change for political reasons alone these core definitions. To close our video, I want to talk about refugees. World Refugee Day is celebrated internationally on June 20th. And on that note, I want to talk a bit about where we are and what does the road ahead look like here in the United States. Last year, the number of refugees worldwide reached an all-time high of over 26 million. That is the highest since World War II. And on top of all of that, this was in the middle of a global pandemic that has impacted us all. At the same time, President Trump drastically reduced the number of refugees that are annually accepted in the United States, setting the cap at 15,000. Now, as we celebrate this date, the hope that the United States restored its leadership in protecting the human rights of refugees is once again rising. When President Biden was on campaign, he pledged to change the refugee situation dramatically and raise the annual refugee cap to 125,000. And after a few bumps on the road, where he first decided to maintain Trump's admission cap, he finally raised the number in May to 62,500 and pledged to double the cap to 125,000 for 2022. And while some harmful policies that have been officially terminated, like the Remain in Mexico policy, the fact is that the way things are going, we are on a path to resettle a historically low number of refugees in 2021. As of May 31st, only 3,250 refugees have been resettled this year. At that rate, fewer than 5,000 refugees will be resettled in 2021. That is lower than any year under the Trump administration. Why? This is due in part to the delay in raising the cap from the start of this administration. The lack of early actions affected negatively over 700 refugees facing urgent protection risks and had their flights to the U.S. canceled. It also left resettlement agencies waiting for government funding to rebuild their operational capacity. Now these agencies are trying to catch up with their objectives, but are only expected to resettle about 10 to 15,000 refugees in 2021 maximum. Before the Trump administration's drastic cuts, the United States had admitted more refugees each year than all other countries combined under a program that is now 41 years old. But upon his arrival, President Trump slashed refugee admissions, and more importantly, he affected the whole foundational capacity of the entire U.S. refugee resettlement system. Since resettlement agencies are paid by the federal government for each refugee served, during his administration, about 100 agencies were first forced to close due to financial problems because of the low number of refugees admitted into the country. Along with this, he cut the number of U.S. refugees officers overseas, reducing the interviews conducted by 1/3, and in creating enhanced vetting procedures that created new barriers for refugee admission. Procedures like requesting the refugee to submit paperwork for 10 years worth of addresses, which created a lot of bureaucratic inefficiencies. It slowed the process and in the end did not meaningfully improve national security. No surprise there. So what should the next steps and actions be? Although with the rise of the refugee cap, President Biden sent a signal of improvement, it's only a signal, and real actions are needed. To overcome all the setbacks that were caused by the previous administration, it will be needed to hire and train more refugee officers, to invest in improving the technology at their disposal and allowing them to process the backlog of refugee applications more efficiently. As always, it is much easier to destroy than it is to create. I could take a hammer and destroy something in an hour. It might take me a week or longer to build it back. To overcome, tools like video conferencing capabilities in remote locations are key to help the situation, giving refugee resettlement agencies a sustainable method of federal funding that does not rely exclusively on annual swings in refugee admissions is a good idea as well. These would allow them to better align resources and scale operations when needed, but it might create inefficiencies if they're getting paid and refugees aren't being allowed in. That's all the time we have for today. If there are any particular topics you would like me to talk about, leave a comment below. Let me know what's on your mind and we'll try to give you an answer either in a future video or reach out directly to you. Remember, I'm here to help you. It's my pleasure to help you with any doubts or problems you may have. If you know someone who could find this information useful, please share it with them. It would mean the world to me. If you want to talk about your specific case, don't hesitate to contact us. We'll find the best solution for your situation. And if we can't help you, we won't take your money. That's it for today. As always, stay healthy and be well.